snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys! So I recently did a poll on Twitter to ask you guys for some help in deciding some of the things that I would do for video ideas, and one of the suggestions that I got was to do authors that I most want to read. So authors I've not read yet, but I plan to read soon. I own some of their books, or I just really want to get to them at some point in the future. So I have a whole stack of them. I'm going to do 10, and I'm going to go through the male authors that I want to read this time, but of course there will be a female authors video as well. I've already written up the list, so I know that it's coming. So just hold your horses, and that will be up soon as well. A lot of them are science fiction, because science fiction is an area I still feel like I am exploring and kind of getting into and just dipping in and out, but I want to make more progress with science fiction over the next few months and years, and just get a few of my favourite authors to be sci-fi authors rather than fantasy. So let's get started. The first one is an author I don't actually own any books by yet, but I really want to, and that is William Gibson, who is the author of the Neuromancer series. I think it's a series, it might be just a single book. I've heard great things about William Gibson time and time again, and I haven't picked up any of his books yet, but I definitely plan to, and I've heard that this is a great start point with him. I know that loads of people regard this as one of the greats of science fiction, so it certainly is a book that I plan on getting and also reading fairly soon in the future. So do let me know, out of all of these authors, if there's one particular one that you want me to read like now and I should have already read them. I feel like a lot of these are authors that a lot of people will think, oh, you should have already read them, but I haven't. So let's carry on with the list. The next author I really want to try out is Ian M. Banks, and for him I have Consider Phlebas, or Phlebas, I'm not sure how you say it. I believe this is book 1 in publication for the Culture series, but I have since heard from Elizabeth that Player of Games, which is this book, is a better start point with the series. I picked this one up just because I thought it was the first, but apparently Player of Games makes way more sense as an entry point into the universe of the Culture, and so I should start with that one, or that's her recommendation. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to pick that one up and start there, but this is the one I already owned, and I'll just read you a little bit. The war raged across the galaxies, billions had died, billions more were doomed. Moons, planets, and the very stars themselves faced destruction, cold-blooded, brutal, and worse, random. And I'm going to just read you the first few lines of the book so you can get a feel for what it's like. The ship didn't have a name. It had no human crew because the factory craft which constructed it had been excavated long ago. It had no life support system or accommodation units for the same reason. It had no class number or fleet designation because it was a mongrel made from bits and pieces of different types of warcraft, and it didn't have a name because the factory craft had no time left for such niceties. So that's how it starts off. It sounds pretty interesting. I'm definitely intrigued. I want to keep reading, but let me know if this is the author that you vote for me to pick up and dive into first. The next author I have on my list is a fairly old name in science fiction now. He's written quite a few books, but I've never read any, and that is Stephen Baxter, who I saw when I went to Galant's Fest. He was fantastic. He gave a talk with Alastair Reynolds about their new book, and they were just both super, super interesting. I really want to check out some of their works. I've told you guys quite a lot about this one in my recent hauls, so I won't go into any more detail other than it's a follow-up to The War of the Worlds. But this one, which is Obelisk, I was sent for review and I haven't read it yet. So it says, 10 kilometres. If you laid it flat out, it would take a reasonably healthy man 2 hours to walk its length, and the walk up the stairs, if you took it, was itself 14 kilometres long. Mars was a small world, but built on a big scale, with tremendous craters and deep valleys, but only the great Tharsis volcanoes would have dwarfed the obelisk. All of mankind seemed to agree it was a magnificent human achievement, especially to have been constructed so early in the era of the colonization of Mars. Now, I believe this is actually a collection of short stories, some of which are set in one of his worlds, and some of them aren't. I'm not entirely sure. I think it's the Ultima and Proxima series, or duology world. I'll just read you a little bit from the first story, which is called On Christ's Plain. You haven't even seen a picture of her, Jono said, panting as he pedalled. She's called Hero, Vikram said. You're bride-to-be in Hellas Basin. Shut up. Jono laughed, wheezing. The fly cycle dipped, and Vikram had to push harder to bring them back up to their proper altitude. It was always like this with Jono. At 15, he was the same age as Vikram, but a few centimetres shorter and a good few kilometres heavier, enough to unbalance the cycle. Jono didn't have enough breath to even talk and cycle, but he talked anyhow. Vikram didn't mind taking the strain for his friend. He liked the feel of his legs pumping at the pedals, his breath deepening, the skin suit snug around him, the slow unwinding of the crumpled landscape under them, and the way that the translucent wings from the cycle frame caught the buttery light of the Martian afternoon. He liked the idea that it was his muscles and his muscles alone, propelling them across that sky. So that is this one. Let me know if you vote for Stephen Baxter. The next author I have is one I just mentioned, and that is Alastair Reynolds, who is the author of Revenger and the Revelation Space series. I believe he has a load of other books too, so if I like him, then I've got a lot of material I can dig into. I've mentioned Revenger before to you guys, and I've told you a little bit about it. Apparently it's a bit more of an easy one to get into. Revelation Space seems to be the one he's best known for, and it's the one I've heard most people talk about and say that they really, really enjoy. So I'm going to read you a little bit of this one. On the back it says, 900,000 years ago, something wiped out the Amaratin. For the human colonists now settling the Amaratin homeworld, Resurgam, it's of little more than an academic interest, even after the discovery of a long-hidden, almost perfect Amaratin city and a colossal statue of a winged Amaratin. For brilliant but ruthless scientist Dan Silvestre, it's more than merely intellectual curiosity, and he will stop at nothing to get at the truth. Right, let's have a little look inside. Chapter 1. Mantle Sector, North Nekabit, Resurgam, Delta Pavnos System, 2551. There was a razor storm coming in, and Sylvester stood on the edge of the excavation and wondered if any of his labourers would survive the night. The archaeological dig was an array of deep square shafts separated by balks of the sheer-sided soil. The classical Wheeler box grid, the shafts went down tens of metres, walled by transparent cofferdams spun from the hyperdiamond. 1,000,000 years of stratified geological history pressed against the sheets, but it would only take one good dustfall, one good razor storm, to fill the shafts almost to the surface. So that's Revelation Space. The next author is more of a fantasy author, and this is Tom Lloyd, who I saw at Galax Fest. He is the author of The Stormcaller. I believe he's got another series as well, although I can't remember the name, but if I find it, I'll put it on the screen. This one is, like I say, fantasy. A land ruled by prophecy and the whims of the gods. A man at the heart of a war he barely understands. He wields powers he may never be able to control. He's fighting for survival in a time of revenge. And the Stormcaller starts out with, in the dark corners of night, he dreams of a silent palace by the shore, a place where harsh sunlight and leaden shadows are cast over the white marble of its corridors. Without the cries of seabirds or the whistle of wind over flagstones, the silence here is profound, disturbed only by the occasional faint break of a wave upon the rocks outside and his own hurried heartbeat. He finds himself in an immense hexagonal hall, looking down at an incomprehensible script carved onto the floor. The strange words corkscrew slowly in front of the dark doorway to a foot of the spiral staircase, the hall's only other feature. It rises up from the floor, twirling 30 yards up through the air, then somehow fails to quite meet the hall's flat ceiling, stopping less than a yard short. Prayer or curse, he follows the oblique path of writing around and around until he finally reaches the staircase. Each step has a symbol cut into its centre, runes he has never seen before. After a pause, he places his foot squarely on the first and continues in that way, eyes moving always to the next shape, until he reaches the top. The air feels thinner here. It looks a dizzying drop to the floor below when he leans over the balustrade. Then he squeezes through the hatchway in the ceiling and finds himself staring up from the floor at a cavernous, domed shrine. So that is Tom Lloyd, The Stormcaller. The next author I actually have his book, or his first book, on Kindle and audio, and his book is called Relic Guild, and it's by Edward Cox. The cover looks like this, and these are his other two books, which I do have in physical form, so I'll show you those two. They are The Cathedral of Known Things and The Watcher of Dead Time, and he seemed like such a fun person when he was there. He was doing loads of chatting and being really energetic, and he made everyone feel really welcome, and he was just a really bubbly character. So I definitely want to read his books. I believe this is a kind of YA adult crossover series. I've heard it pitched by a lot of people as YA, but I'm not sure where it technically falls. It sounds like a pretty fun series, so I won't read you these ones because obviously they're the second and the third, but let me know if you've heard of this and you want me to read this series because it does sound like a pretty fun one. The next author I have is China McEvoy, who is quite a literary kind of writer, I've heard. I believe he does science fiction and fantasy elements in his book, but he does come across as quite literary at times too, so it'll be interesting to try him out. I haven't read any of his books before. The only one of his that I own is Perdido Street Station, which is this one. It is ginormous, so we'll have to see how I go, but I've heard this is a great start point with him, so, you know, that sounds good. Belt to scrub, to fields, to farms, to these first tumbling houses that ride from the earth. It has been night for a long time. The hovels that encrust the river's edge have grown like mushrooms around me in the dark. We rock, we pitch in the deep current. Behind me, the man tugs uneasily at his rudder and the barge corrects. Light lurches as the lantern swings. The man is afraid of me. I lean out of the prow of the small vessel across the darkly moving water. Over the engine's oily rubble and the cresses of the river, house sounds are building. Timbers whisper and the wind strokes thatch. Walls settle and floors shift to fill space. The tens of houses have become hundreds, thousands. They spread backwards from the banks and shed light from all across the plain. They surround me. They are growing. They are taller and fatter and noisier. Their roofs are slate. Their walls are strong and brick. So that is the start of this one. The next one I have is an author I've meant to read for a long time because I saw him last year at FantasyCon in 2015, and he was really engaging and he talked about his series, which sounded really, really fun, and that is this series, the macaque series. It's apparently about sort of genetically modified monkeys, I believe. It's meant to be quite funny and quite amusing. The first one is called macaque. The second one is called Macaque Attack. And I've owned this one for ages. I recently picked up the first one, so now I can start the series. And let's find out what it's about. Part 1, Breaking News. From the European Standard Online Edition. King injured in grenade attack. Assailant targets royal motorcade. Paris, 11th of July 2058. The King and the Duchess of Brittany have been injured by an explosion on the streets of Paris. An air ambulance flew His Majesty King William V, ruler of the United Kingdom and Great Britain, of France, Ireland and Norway, and head of the United European Commonwealth, to a private hospital last night where surgeons battled for 3 hours to save his life. The royal couple were on their way to a formal reception at Champs-Élysées Plaza Hotel, where they were due to announce plans for next year's Unification Day celebrations, which will mark the centenary of the merger between France and Great Britain. Eyewitness reports say that the shots were fired as the royal motorcade turned onto the Champs-Élysées and a missile, possibly a rocket-propelled grenade, struck the royal limousine. Following the explosion, police shot dead an unidentified assailant who died at the scene. So that is the start of this one, which sounds pretty exciting, I have to say. And the final author that I really want to read something by is Adrian Tchaikovsky, who has 2 series that I'm really interested in. The 2 that I own are Children of Time with Empire of Black and Gold. This is a fantasy, this is a sci-fi. I'm not sure which one I want to start with for him, but I'm going to read you a little bit of this one because I've had this one longer and I've heard more about this one until this one got nominated for an award and now everyone's talking about it. Basically, he's a pretty big name and I've seen him a lot of times at different cons I've been to and he's really nice, so I felt like I should try out one of his books and both of these appealed to me. So this one starts out with, after Stenworld picked up the telescope for the 9th time, Marius said, "You will know first from the sound." The burly man stopped and peered down at him, telescope still half poised. From their 3rd-story retreat in the city walls were a mass of black and red, the defenders hurrying into place atop the ramparts and about the gates. "How do you mean, the sound?" Marius, sitting on the floor with his back to the wall, looked up at him. "What you hear now is men braving themselves for a fight. When it starts, they will be quiet, just for a moment. They will brace themselves. Then it will be a different kind of noise." It was a long speech for him. Even from here, Stenward could hear a constant murmur from the gates. He lowered the telescope reluctantly. "There'll be a great almighty noise when they come in, if all goes according to plan." Marius shrugged. "Then listen for that." Below, there was a quick patter of feet as someone ascended the stairs. Stenward twitched, but Marius remarked simply, "Tissamon," and went back to staring at nothing. In the room beneath them were 9 men and women dressed in the same chain hauberk and helm that Marius wore, and looking enough like him to be family. Stenward knew their minds were meshed together, touching each other's and touching Marius's too, thoughts passing freely back and forth between them. He could not imagine how it must be for them. That is the final one. So there are lots of really exciting beginnings to those books, I think you'll all agree, but I'd love to hear if you guys have read any of these authors and what you thought of them, or if there are any beginnings of those books that kind of gave you a flavour of their work and you really want to pick up some of their books and try them out too. Do let me know, leave me comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video very soon. Bye!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me.